back to the channel. Sorry for a little bit of a hiatus. I kind of wanted to determine what content I wanted to push forward. I was going to do another mock draft, but we're kind of going to go away from it. And today we're going to talk about how we can fix the 49ers. Ultimately, through looking at some of the key free agents available at every position, we're going to be looking at, give or take, around 25 players. So a couple of videos ago, we went over the whole offseason plan. I proposed a whole offseason plan, which included cuts/restructures, players we might resign, free agency, trades, and then a mock draft. Specifically, we're going to be looking at one part of that video, which is, again, free agency. And I guess without further ado, let's jump right into it. Briefly, we're going to look at some of the same slides. I will make this quick, though. Of course, Robert Saleh is off to the Tennessee Titans as their head coach. He's on the all-bald coaching staff. I kind of saw a funny tweet that every single member of that coaching staff is bald. But excited to see what he can do over there. He brought some ballers, Dayball among others. And, of course, Raheem Morris is the replacement coming from Atlanta. A coach who had success specifically on the defense. He revamped that defensive line. Of course, a terrible thing that happened with James Pierce Jr. in the last couple of weeks here. But in terms of the play that he got out of them on the field, that is something that we can hope Raheem Morris can bring to our 49ers defensive front, who has... of course, we have a couple of young key players. And that cap space, by the way, it's just it's going to be there as kind of a reference guide, if you will. A projection from Sport Track is that we have $30 million in cap space. This was also from the offseason video. I did make a change in terms of cutting and restructuring, and I chose to not cut Jake Brendel here because ultimately he saves under $3 million. He sits right at 2.9. And while I really don't like him very much as a player, let alone a starting center in the league, I think we could keep him as a depth piece with the expectation that we can pick up a center in free agency or draft one late in the draft, someone like Pat Coogan. I still wholeheartedly stand by, as you guys can see at the top there, cutting Jair Brown. I think that this is a player who's regressed every year since his first. And really was meant to be a ball hawk coming out of Penn State. Never has fully translated. And he's even really regressed in like the run game as well. He takes bad angles that leads to our team getting gashed in the running game, and of course him being the last line of defense, it's not very good. And in terms of post June 1st cuts, Brandon Ayuk would be the player I proposed for that. Of course, Brandon Ayuk, some fans recommend trading him, and to that I say I'm not necessarily opposed. However, I do believe that we won't necessarily get a trade package sent for him. Maybe a potential suitor would be the Commanders, the Arizona State ties there with him and Jaden Daniels. However, I think, we just let go of the situation. I still hold the view that he was a very good wide receiver for us, an all-pro for the time that he was on the team, especially those middle 2 years in his career. But at the same time, I have to forget all that. He's gone. He's not going to play another snap. In terms of restructuring and extending, I am almost 100% certain that at least one of these players, either Nick Bosa or Trent Williams, will get restructured. If I had to pick one that's more likely, I would say Trent Williams, although I think that there's a very good chance that they both get restructured. So going into free agency, that number is at 70 million if we restructure both. We would still have well over 50 million if we restructure one, which will definitely happen. And anyways, let's get into the main part of this video. We're going to be looking at every position, and Basically, what I want to do for this video is I want to have 2 or 3 players at each position, and I kind of want to go in descending value. So as you see here, Tyler Linderbaum is the expensive option, and then Elijah Vera Tucker is the middle option, still expensive, but not as expensive. And then we have the cheaper option in Joel Bitonio. Just so you guys can see ultimately who's available and who we can grab for cheap versus who we can kind of splurge on, specifically in positions of need. Now, Tyler Linderbaum is probably my most desirable free agent, at least for myself. I really would like the 49ers to make a move. You don't see too many centers getting drafted early. He was the exception, and he has proved to be worth it. At 26, he's a 3-time, maybe with this past year, 4-time Pro Bowler. And he is just an elite zone center, and he's very athletic. If you guys didn't know, he has a wrestling background, so that kind of shows up in his leverage and balance. And because of that, as well as his trading, he kind of is able to reset defenders a lot of the time. But I think the thing with Linderbaum is he's consistently one of the best run blocking centers and offensive linemen in football. He is like an elite reach blocker specifically, and he doesn't get penalized all that often. In terms of PFF, which we can look at over here, I'm going to search his name right here. I know he is right there. However, just to exemplify what I'm saying, an excellent run blocking grade, a sufficient above average pass blocking grade. And you look, there's a couple of years where he drew some penalties, but he is pretty disciplined. And he is, of course, the elite option that would be available for free agency. He's going to command a ton of cash. However, when we think about the fit for this team, I think he's perfect for like outside zone systems. So, of course, that would match the 49ers play style. And he is kind of, based off what I've seen in the past, he's similar schematically in terms of value to what we had in Alex Mack all those years ago. And, his ceiling is, of course, all pro, and his floor is like Pro Bowler, high end center. I think the only weakness with him is sometimes he'll struggle a little bit. I was watching some tape on him earlier today. He sometimes, and this is against the like bigger nose tackles in the league, struggles with specifically pure power matchups in the trenches, but that's like me being very nitpicky. So his contract would look like 4 years, $72 million with a $15 million cap hit. Of course, like I mentioned, going to demand a ton of money, but he is worth it because he is one of the best free agents available right now. Now I move to Elijah Vera Tucker. He is a little bit older. He's 27, not old, a little bit older than Tyler Linderbaum. And the thing with him is he's a kind of a hybrid lineman. He's pretty versatile. The thing with him that I mentioned in one of my previous videos is that he has a very notable injury history in that he has suffered a couple season-ending injuries, notably this past year. I think the thing with him, though, is because it's almost a guarantee that Burford's going to leave, and he would be an immediate starting guard who, like I said, is versatile, so he could slide out to the outside if there is a injury situation. He's kind of that versatile chess piece. And him being able to hold up in multiple spots would give us, specifically Kyle, an advantage in disguising protections. And I think for him, again, the ceiling is a Pro Bowl caliber guard. And I think his floor is just a solid starter, albeit, again, an asterisk on that because he does have a little bit of an injury history. For that reason, he is quite a bit cheaper, and teams are going to try to get him on a 1-year prove-it deal, which makes sense. I I honestly would not mind having this guy on the team. Those top two are great options. And then our third option here is Joel Bitonio, who's the 34-year-old guard for the Cleveland Browns. This guy has been just a solid anchor for the last like 10 or 11 years. He's been an all-pro. He's been a Pro Bowl level player. Had a couple of years, really good years recently in like 2020 and 2021. But of course, now age has caught up a little bit with him. Still a very savvy veteran. And the thing with him is he's an elite pass protector. So just looking at some of his PFF grades right here, he is sufficient in the running game as well. But he is a very great pass blocker and allows a low pressure rate. Looking at some of the years I mentioned, like 2020, very solid year. 2021, pretty much the best guard in the game. These are, not that far back, and he's still, in the last couple of years, is solid. Again, the interesting thing with him is he is just as good as in pass blocking as he is in run blocking. You look at these years too, and he is very disciplined. Again, ultimately, my mindset in adding him onto this list in this video is that he is like an elite processor because he's played so long. He can recognize stunts. He could be like again another 1 year guy, so a short-term Super Bowl window kind of guy. And the thing with him is I don't think watching this guy growing up, I think that he rarely lost cleanly. It would take, two players on him or some sort of stunt to knock him off balance. And again, while his athletic decline is inevitable, like the dude is 34 years old, his technique will and has kept him productive. And so these are some options for the offensive line. And again, I'm not covering everybody. I want to cover these guys as quickly as I can. I don't want to make this video too long. I'm aiming for under 50 minutes, sorry. But let me know in the comments if I've missed anyone that you guys want to talk about. I think there will be some comments about that here. Like I don't discuss some players like Rashid Shaheed or George Pickens just solely because I don't think we will get George Pickens. It should be a no-brainer for the Cowboys to re-sign him. Although I did see a report that the Cowboys would consider a second-round pick for him, although I'm taking that with a huge grain of salt. Anyways, and also really quickly, all three of these receivers, I hold the view that none of them can be a wide receiver one. I think they can all be very good or exceptional wide receiver twos. I just think in terms of their skills and weaknesses, they don't quite have what it takes to be a wide receiver one. Anyways, we're starting with Alec Pierce. And Alec Pierce is someone who has gotten better every single year he's been in the league. He hit 1,000 yards for the first time this year. Is a player that is a vertical, boundary field stretcher. This guy averages like 21 yards per catch, which is insane. High average depth of target, which would be awesome for this team. He's like 6'3", 2 something. So let me actually double check that. So he does have the prototypical X build actually. And the thing about him is because he's such a nifty deep threat, and because he stretches defenses vertically, that'll inevitably open up underneath concepts. And yeah, we look at his build, 6'3", 211. And we even saw that in the 49ers game, had a great game against us. Even though he is primarily a deep threat, you ideally would want him to command a little bit more of a target share. But of course, that would improve because the Colts have three solid wide receivers in Pierce, Downs, and Pittman. Is also a decent red zone threat as well. I had the luxury of watching this guy in the Berlin International game against the Falcons, where he caught a very nice TD against two defenders. And besides being a field stretcher, he is also very good in terms of contested catching as well. So it's not like you throw to him deep only when it's open. You can throw to him when there's a corner glued to him, and He does have a very good quality for tracking the ball. Of course, he is fairly expensive because it's not too often where we get these vertical threats in free agency. Again, like I said, the one weakness with him is I think he is a little bit limited in his route tree versatility, and he's somewhat boomer bust. However, on this team, he could really shine again as like a high end wide receiver too. And the next player is Romeo Doubs. Out of the three players here, I do believe that he could be most likely to become a wide receiver one because I think he's the more nuanced route runner out of them all. Doubs is also 26 years old, and he's more of a possession, red zone target kind of receiver. He has got strong touchdown numbers the last couple years, and he also has some good contested catch reliability. He, like Alec Pierce, has a solid build for a receiver, a good frame. He is 6'2", 204. In terms of the touchdowns I was talking about, 6, 4, 8, and in his rookie year, 3. I think out of the jumbled group of Packers wide receivers, he kind of emerged as the one, even though Christian Watson came and played very well. The thing with him is, compared to the other two, I think he's more of an effective chain mover because he's a more nuanced route runner and is a boundary target. Nice third down complement as well. Also, the one thing you notice about this guy, it's kind of interesting, is he has some insane body control and timing. There was this one catch this season. I forget the team it was against, but he contorted his body and made the kind of catch that Travis Hunter made a couple years ago in Colorado, where I think it was NDSU. Anyways, again, super reliable in tight windows. While he's not an elite separator, I think he, understands spacing pretty good. Another weakness, I suppose, is he kind of lacks that elite top-end speed. Alec Pierce is certainly faster than him, as is Wan'Dale Robinson. Now, going to the last on the list, Wan'Dale Robinson, who is a little bit cheaper than Alec Pierce and a little bit more expensive than Romeo Doubs. He is the youngest of the group, 25. And I think in terms of archetypes, I would classify this guy as your kind of yak slot weapon guy. He commands a ton of targets and receptions, and he has the short area quickness. So the thing with him is, like, he can throw the ball to him around the line of scrimmage because he has pretty elite lateral speed, and he can get separation underneath. And in terms of the fit, like it does make sense for the 49ers to potentially go after him because, they are or have been a yak-based offense, and he is like pretty much exactly that. Again, the guy's 5'8", so he's not going to be a contested catch guy. He's also not the most nuanced route runner, but I think his ability to change direction without, losing all that much speed makes him dangerous on, like I mentioned, those screens and bubble routes. And if you think about it, on the Giants, he was kind of an extension of the run game. The one thing about him is when Malik Neighbors has been injured the past while, and when Malik Neighbors had gotten injured, you kind of wanted him to thrust into a bigger role. And that's kind of ironic that I'm saying that because he was top 10 in receptions and targets. But you almost wanted to see a little bit more. However, on the other side of the coin, the Giants' offense wasn't very good. So he's kind of a little bit of a wild card in that regard. Wan'Dale did post a 1,000-yard season. And, oh God, I should have read his first name. And just looking at his PFF, I'll show you very briefly. Okay. They're not going to bear with me here. Looking at Wan'Dale Robinson's PFF right here, had a very solid 70 receiving grade. You want to be above a 70. 1,000 yards, again, 131 targets, pretty insane, 92. You look at the average depth of target, though, 9 yards. That kind of, alluded to what I was talking about with the line of scrimmage stuff. In his past couple of years, he has, only improved. And he is very deserving of a contract. Like I said, I don't think any of these guys can particularly be a wide receiver one. However, I could be completely proven wrong. What I mean by that is I just would like to see someone else be brought alongside one of them, such as a receiver taken in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. So someone like, I don't know, Casey Conception or Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper, Antonio Williams, someone like that in the first couple of rounds who you can bring in with one of these free agent wide receivers. Because then we have our wide receiver room revamped with Ricky Pearsall there as well. Anyways, going to our next position, it is going to be the running back position. And in terms of my personal opinion, I hold the view that they should have a competition between Isaac Orindo and Jordan James to sort out that running back 2 position behind McCaffrey. I'm kind of under the impression that they prefer Jordan James. They gave us, the 49ers coaching staff gave us a hint in the divisional game against the Seahawks where they put him in, Jordan James in instead of Isaac Orindo. I did like Gurindo. I think he filled in very well for McCaffrey, but it seems like he's kind of in the doghouse. So while the running back is not a huge need, I'm just going over pretty much every position besides quarterback, punter, and kicker. So the first player that popped up is Tyler Algier. And he's super interesting because he's just got out of his rookie contract, still very young, 26 years old. You think of him as like your typical downhill volume grinder, bruiser back. Of course, he was splitting work with one of the better backs in Bijan Robinson. I think one thing that a lot of fans forget, though, is that this guy had a very productive 1,000-yard season in his rookie year before Bijan was in the league. He had something like 5 yards per carry and is one of the better yards after contact backs in the entire league. Of course, there was a lot of discourse going on with the Falcons fans about Algier being a touchdown merchant and taking away from Bijan. But at the end of the day, there's a reason he was deployed on the red zone. It's because he has a high success rate in those short yardage and interior running situations. Again, like he thrives more so in between the tackles, and he is someone that can fall forward. He has good contact balance because, again, this dude's like 5'11", 220. And he's not going to be flashy, but he just maintains a constant rhythm. And I think in a committee, he could stabilize early downs, and I think he'd be a good option. You think about the double backfield that the 49ers have used in the past. Ever since McCaffrey, we haven't, which is kind of a shame because I thought Brian Robinson slotted in pretty well. But think about like 2019. I believe the year I'm thinking about is the correct one, but Tevin Coleman and Raheem Mostert, 2 guys that don't jump out at you, but they combined for fireworks. I mean, those guys were very efficient. I would not mind coming closer to a running back by committee, of course. McCaffrey is one of the best running backs in the league. He is the RB1 set in stone, but he is getting a year older, maybe losing a tiny amount of juice. So that could kind of want to make us go for a running back here. And Rico Dowdle is the second running back. This guy's a slasher, and this year he kind of proved that he was capable of handling a lot of volume. Sneaky 1,000-yard season this year and last year. He's very efficient on the inside, and he has, pretty good burst. Again, his workload is underrated. He filled in for Chuba, played better than Chuba, honestly. Chuba Hubbard's Canadian. I'm Canadian. I'll give him that. And he proved to be very sufficient in the receiving game as well. There were a couple of plays I watched where they deployed this guy as a receiver, and Bryce Young targeted him more than a few times. Again, he can handle the full workload if needed. And I think he, offers, like I mentioned, a good balance between inside running and modest receiving value. Like looking at his numbers very quickly, Um, I guess the one downside to him is he's not going to be someone that will be like elite in explosive long runs, but uh, he did show flashes of that this year as well. Again, 1,076 yards this year, and the year before 1,079. Like a very solid 4.6 yards per carry in each of his last 2 years. He just needed some opportunity, man, and he got that. Um, we look at forced mixed tackles as well. 22nd in that. That is great. And he is, like I mentioned, a slasher who is, fairly versatile. And we move on to the last running back here, Kenneth Gainwell. An interesting case because he may kind of remind fans a little bit of Christian McCaffrey, but Kenneth Gainwell is 27, and he never really had opportunity before this year because he was on that Philly team. Of course, backed up Saquon, and before that, backed up DeAndre Swift, who proved to be a excellent running back this year. In terms of an archetype, he's like your third down receiving specialist. Of course, had amazing receiving efficiency this year. You think of that one catch in the game between the Detroit Lions. That was just unbelievable. And he's pretty reliable in pass protection as well. You think about what Kyle could do if he was brought on. Having to think about both CMC and Kenneth Gainwell would kind of be a nightmare, especially on plays where he can run two running backs. He is a fairly effective mismatch weapon, and Kyle could definitely scheme him up on some screen packages or third down plays or something of the sort. Like McCaffrey, you think about where McCaffrey shines the most in the receiving game. It's when he's isolated against linebackers. It's similar with Kenneth Gainwell. He has a pretty good route running ability for a running back. He is not known to be a runner, but he's actually a pretty efficient runner. I'll just briefly show you some of his numbers here. Just looking at like his yards per carry this year, 4.7 was very solid. And again, he had. It's not going to show the receiving totals. It'll show over here. Fourth among running backs in receptions, and this is a guy who was in a committee and who was the running back 3 to start the season. He had to pass Caleb Johnson, which he did fairly early. And then he pretty much passed Jaylen Warren towards the end of the season. So again, while he is more of a receiving back, he also offers a lot of value in the running game and would be an extremely cheap option at $8 million over 2 years. Now going over to tight ends, and going back to the point I made not too long ago, if we were going to sign either one of Alec Pierce, Romeo Doubs, or Wan'Dale Robinson, I would honestly be more inclined to grab Kyle Pitts and then just draft a receiver really high in the draft. I feel like that would be the better scenario. Also, I made this PowerPoint before Tyreek Hill was released. He can definitely be an option. Of course, he's coming off a gruesome injury, so they'd have to monitor that. I do think that Tyreek Hill will most likely go to the Chiefs. I kind of think that's the perfect marriage there. Anyways, though, going back to Kyle Pitts, he had, what a bounce back year for him. He ended the year off really well. His receiving numbers don't completely jump off the charts, but watching the games, he really showed why he was drafted that early. He is like your tight end who's more of an oversized wide receiver, but is just a mismatch weapon, like especially vertically, man. He had that 1,000-yard rookie season and then kind of simmered down a little bit and had a great season this year. He had very strong separation metrics too. I don't know if they'll show them here, but just briefly taking a look at Kyle Pitts here, he had a phenomenal receiving grade among tight ends. 928 yards, the second most among tight ends this year. Not enough good things to say about him here. And showed he he was very physical after the catch as well. Uh, Proved to be a amazing yak player. And what's interesting is you think about the Falcons and how they started off the year. Drake London was off to an exceptional campaign this year. Like, he was on pace for 1,500 yards, maybe more. And then, of course, injuries kind of got in the way. But when he recovered, Kyle Pitts was still the primary target. Like, Kyle Pitts drew and took away targets from Drake London. And he took away targets from Darnell Mooney as well, who has struggled a little bit, but he's no slouch as a wide receiver too. Like, Darnell Mooney is a great route runner. Um, but that just shows how Kyle Pitts was able to create, I don't know, seam stress, coverage rotation, all of that this year. And I think when featured properly, like he was this year, especially think about that one game against the Buccaneers, he like completely altered their defensive structure. So thinking about his ceiling, he is an elite tight end one that you can mismatch, and then his floor is still like a high end receiving specialist. And I think the one weakness with Pitts is he's not the most physical blocker. He'll still get the job done. But of course, we have George Kittle for that as well. And the next player is Isaiah Likely, coming out of Coastal Carolina a couple of years ago. He's kind of like your big slot tight end. He is a player that is very nifty after the catch, especially for a tight end. He's great in the red zone. Got some good red zone usage. Think about that opener a couple of years ago against the Chiefs where he almost contorted his body. As a bigger human being able to do that was pretty unbelievable. I think with him, he's been pretty efficient in limited opportunities, Isaiah Likely. Like, if you think about, he has been under Mark Andrews, who has been one of the better tight ends in recent history. Of course, is getting older. But he's still in the upper echelon. Like you look at Isaiah Likely here, 73 receiving grade. He did not register anything this year because, again, he hasn't had that much opportunity. But I would say that he's been hyper efficient. Like on 30 receptions in 2023, 5 touchdowns, very solid. 42 receptions, 6 touchdowns in 2024. Again, and this year, he just struggled to stay on the field a little bit. And that is kind of a high asking price to demand for a guy that hasn't fully been proven. But I think that he is, a strong 12 personnel option, something that would be beneficial in the 49ers system. And he's very fluid in space. Like I mentioned, he can align in the slot and create mismatches against safeties that way. Very instinctual in the red zone. And, of course, the weakness, like I mentioned, is that he, has not handled a full tight end one workload. So that's it for the offensive side of the ball. I missed someone like Cade Otton. I didn't include. I wanted to, but he kind of reminds me of Jake Ton just a little bit, so I chose not to include him there. Now we move on to the defensive line, and we're going to talk about John Franklin Myers. He is kind of an outlier for the defensive line position because he is a beast in the pass rush and has a lot of rotational versatility. Man, he generates a ton of pressures. Like this past year, 7.5 sacks, 40 pressures, very strong pressure rate per snap. And the Broncos have a couple tough decisions. They have this on their plate, Dre Greenlaw. It's going to be super interesting. Like I mentioned, just collapses pockets consistently, and he's one of the rare defensive linemen that offers more pass rush value than run value, and would be honestly perfect in our wide 9 system. He's played both on the inside and the outside as well. So on obvious passing downs, you can plug him in, and he can definitely reduce backfield decisions that way. He's not going to eat a ton of blocks because he's not like an extremely huge defensive lineman. However, he is, again, just a awesome player. Briefly taking a look at his stats. And again, like I mentioned in the other videos, PFF isn't the end-all be-all, but I do like just looking at their metrics to get a rough guide. And the numbers don't jump off the charts, but 8 sacks this year is, we look at his last couple of years, 8, 3 that year, 7 the year before. He is an exceptional pass rusher as a defensive lineman, which is really what we need, because I don't think CJ West or Alfred Collins, either one of them is particularly good at rushing the passer. I would consider them both average or maybe even below average in that regard. And he's going to command a ton of money because of his production. However, I think he is worth that. And looking towards our second guy, it's Sheldon Rankins. He's definitely a bit older. John Franklin Myers is 29. Rankins is 32. He was a part of that really good Texans defense. I think with Rankins, he is for lack of a better word on our team, he'd be best as a third down interior rusher. I think his run defense is a little bit more situational now that he's gotten older. He has been a very consistent defensive lineman in all of his years. And yeah, I think you would thrive in a rotation where his snap count stays pretty fresh, and where he is targeted more towards passing situations. Can win on one-on-ones. I think in terms of a ceiling for this guy, he could not use 6+ sacks, and his floor is, like I mentioned, a situational pass rush specialist. But for the price and for who he is, for what he's proven, I think he is another player that fans should consider. Briefly looking at his PFF, we look at some of his years in the past, like 2023 had a very good year that year. Again, is not the best run stuffer, but has just proven to be a super consistent commodity throughout all these years. Of course, the knock on him again is that he's definitely older and has lost a little bit of his value, but just kind of food for thought there. Our next player is David Onyemata. We are including a couple Falcons players you guys might have noticed, because of course Raheem Morris is now on our roster, and sometimes coaches tend to bring players over. Onyemata is even a year older than Rankins, but he is the cheapest by far. And unlike Myers and Rankins, he is more of a run stopper. He has a great run defense grade and can even beat double teams. The thing with him is he doesn't offer much in terms of pass rushing. However, I could see him kind of honestly being on the field on the early downs, and then subbing someone like, Myers can play all 3 downs, but subbing someone else in for third down. And again, like, he is structural, so he's not going to be flashy, but he stabilizes a defensive front like he did in Atlanta. And again, as a pass rusher, doesn't offer a crazy ton, but he compresses the pocket more than getting a registering a stat, so his sack numbers don't jump off the board. Briefly looking at his past season, I think he had, again, a better run stopper. Actually, one of the better run stoppers in the entire league. One of the best graded defensive linemen this year in general, which is awesome. He is, again, just a consistent guy. His sack numbers won't jump off the board, but you look at some of these numbers, they're not bad at all. Like, you have 5, 3, and 1. So he regressed a little bit this year, but you can kind of expect that to uptick in the next couple of years. Ultimately, that is it for the defensive line. Now, for edge, I also wanted to include Arnold Adebike, also of the Falcons, on this list. Just after further thought, I don't think that we'd be able to acquire him, because there was a little bit of drama there with Raheem Morris and whatnot. Anyways, starting off with Trey Hendrickson. This guy is a sack artist. That's how you describe him. Elite pass rusher, high win rate, has a huge motor, has played on a bad defense, so it's kind of allowed him to shine. He's not particularly good at stopping the run, but he's sufficient in it. And ultimately, he's like your plug and play guy who can get pressure even when you don't send the blitz. He when I look at some of the plays, he can beat even some of the more elite tackles in the league without good bend, because he's a combination of speed and power. But he also has some nasty moves, man. He has an inside spin move that's awesome. He uses this long arm that frees him up a lot too as well. And yeah, this guy you can plug him and play him, and you can expect him to get double-digit sacks. You can even expect him to get upwards of like 15 sacks. His ceiling is a All-Pro, and I would even say his floor is a Pro Bowler. Briefly looking at this past season, just a absolutely beautiful 90 pass rush grade. Of course, only 4 sacks because he was injured throughout the season. But if you want to see some great sack totals, of course, 18, the most sacks last year, the most sacks the year before. And, I mean, what more can you ask for? Of course, the 49ers are a name for Max Crosby as well. There was a thing that came out today or yesterday that Max Crosby acquired a property in San Fran. But in terms of, free agents on the block right now, Trey Hendrickson is one of the best, and I think the 49ers should unload their chips to get this guy. Joey Bosa is our next player. He's a little bit older. He performed really well rushing the passer this year. He is more of a power rusher. And I think when he's healthy, he has really good hand control. That's what I noticed with him when I've seen him play. And he kind of picks on inexperienced tackles who struggle, is able to transfer that into sacks. Again, the kind of question there is durability. So the 49ers acquiring him, snap count management would be critical to that signing. And he would be a $9.5 million cap hit this year. But just really briefly glancing at Joey Bosa, very solid pass rusher, one of the best edges, 5 sacks this year. Also, a signing that I definitely wouldn't be mad at. Now, probably my favorite player that I highlighted in this video is Jadeveon Clowney, one of the sneakiest free agency ads last year. And the thing about this guy, man, is that he got bust labels earlier in his career. And I think at this point he's outplayed him, man, because he is so productive. He had 8 sacks this past year. He's a great run defender. He's physically imposing too. Has a great build. When you think about him as a pass rusher, he's more of a power rusher than a speed rusher. He doesn't have the best bend, but he had one of the highest pressure. I think he had the highest pressure rate among defensive players this year, which is absolutely insane as a 33-year-old. I honestly could see him come in besides Nick Bosa on the other side and be a tone-setting early down edge. And this guy has consistently gotten upwards of 8 sacks throughout his career. I don't know if he's ever been a Pro Bowler. Actually, sorry, I got to correct myself, 9 sacks. But we look at some of his totals from the 9, 6, 10, 3. And, of course, sacks aren't everything. But the thing about him is he's also an exceptional, like I mentioned, run defender. He is a very solid run defender. He is one of my favorite options because he's going to be cheap. And you think about what this Dallas defensive line did this year, and I think that's something the 49ers could look to, is they combined a couple older players like Jadeveon Clowney and someone like Odigizua, and they combined that with the new age players like Ezeraku. And man, while their defense still isn't that good, their defensive line is going to be pretty good for years to come, especially if they are able to maybe re-sign Clowney. Now, I actually took Devin Lloyd. He's the picture, and I took him off because I don't think the 49ers will grab him. He is an exceptional linebacker. It's just, I really thought to myself, in terms of team needs, and I don't think they're going to pay. His contract would be upwards of like 30 million. I don't think they're going to pay that. He's worth it. Don't get me wrong. Devin Lloyd's worth it. I don't think that the 49ers will pay that for a linebacker because I don't think it's the biggest position of need at the moment. Although that linebacker 2 is very iffy right now. Anyways, just getting into it, we see the first guy on the list is Devin Bush. And a very interesting player because he was also a first-round talent who has kind of been labeled as a little bit of a bust. And weirdly, this year was very good in pass coverage, like was wildly inconsistent. But this year really improved on that. Was one of the better coverage linebackers in the entire league. He's not someone that will play, every snap. I mean, definitely played a lot of snaps, but his coverage grade 80 is his run best trait. We look at like in the years past, that's always been his kind of best attribute. And I think another thing with Devin Bush is he has also improved his missed tackle rate. Again, he struggled with inconsistency, but this year just had a very strong year that, made it kind of showed people why he was a first-round talent. He has sideline-to-sideline range. Like, this guy's very explosive and can chase down tackles. Ultimately, like, consistency will be his key. And yeah, I think his ceiling is a high motor playmaker in space, potential Pro Bowler, and I think his floor is rotational. Think like sub package linebacker, and yeah, man, he is just an awesome player. Eric Kendricks is a player that we are all familiar with. He's the second linebacker, second and last. Of course, he's aging. He is getting old, but he's your veteran linebacker who has, strong instincts. Of course, has declining range because of his age, but he'd be a short-term add, of course, like a 1-year deal kind of thing. And because he's played the game so long, he's able to see plays develop before they unfold. And I think he can kind of complement or compensate his lack of speed or declining speed with his positioning. Definitely view him more as a rotational linebacker. I could see him maybe trying to lay claim to the LB2 role, but I more so see him as a rotational player in that regard. And he'd be very cheap, just a $1.5 million cap hit. So there's that. Now going into our cornerbacks, I also had Tariq Woolen on here. Freak athlete. He's like 6'4", 426. However, I chose to not include him here because I might talk about him in a future video. However, and I don't think it's a huge position of need. I do think potentially we could see a change up in Renardo Green, and I definitely want to see Darrell Luter get replaced. However, I think we're at least okay currently with this position. But the first player I propose is Asante Samuel, who is he's a young player who came off a really bad neck injury, and he worked his way off of the Pittsburgh practice squad and even got an interception and limited playing time. He's kind of like your ball hawk coverage cornerback. He is smaller, so he's going to be undersized versus your bigger receivers. So with that being said, he'll win more on, instincts and anticipation. I think he's probably better operating in zone systems because he's a little bit undersized. And yeah, just looking at 5'10", 180, but looking at his grades this year, just very solid. We look at his past couple of years. Of course, this is kind of skewed because he didn't get that many snaps, but 2023, 2 interceptions. So he'll consistently be that ball hawk for you, and I think he would be a very good depth piece. He will end up being cheap because, again, while he proved that he can play, teams will certainly be skeptical. And our second and last corner here is someone that I think is a little bit mispriced, Chidobe Awuzie. I think, he's projected to only get at most like 2 million in free agency, but I think he is a very solid corner. He's like your physical veteran corner. He's more of a press corner. Reliable starter. He has like a pretty stable floor. Because he's a little bit older, he won't have that super high speed, but he's just like the safe veteran addition, especially if we're looking at a depth corner. Like he definitely would be better than Darrell Luter. I think he's pretty comfortable in both man and zone, but he was never super fast to begin with, so he kind of lacks that elite recovery speed, which means double moves or better receivers might get the better of him. But as a depth corner, I don't think he'll necessarily have to worry about that too much. And again, his value is just ultimately reliability. Like we look at the past couple of years, has always just been a consistent player, especially consistent coverage corner, which is what the 49ers need. Had a very strong 2021 season. And yeah, again, not elite, but competitive, and he's just consistent. Going on to our safeties, we have three here. The first is Cameron Curl, and he's like your hybrid box safety. He had a pretty good year this year. He is one of the more versatile safeties in the league. Good pre-snap. He in that second game against us, the second 49ers game, he played pretty well. And I think he's a pretty consistent tackler as well. That's something he kind of excels in. Looking at his PFF stats this year, yeah, his run defense grade is exceptional. And he's no slouch in coverage. He's can definitely match up against like tight ends physically. He's not purely a single high range safety, if you will, but he's definitely more competent in split safety looks. So something like with Malik Mustafa, and I think they'd actually be a very interesting pairing. Again, looking at Cam Curl, he has this was his best year by far. And Kevin Byard is our second player. He's the older of between the two, between him and Cameron Curl. He's like your ball hawk. This guy, you can always rely on him to get interceptions. Think of that Bears defense. They were super opportunistic. He has very good deep zone instincts and, of course, like a veteran communicator. He's always been about anticipation, even back to his Titans days. Like, this guy has been a very solid starter in the league for many, many years now. 7 INTs, led the league. I think his tackling is, extremely reliable as well. Like he didn't miss a lot of tackles. 11 through 1,000, almost 1,100 snaps is not that bad at all. And I think it boils down to him being, a high IQ veteran safety who would elevate the secondary. Definitely much better than our free safeties that we have on the team now. And he is a little bit more expensive. Than Cam Curl. And our last player that we're going to touch on in this entire video is someone who's pretty interesting. It's Tony Jefferson of the Chargers. He is 34, so a older player. And I think in terms of my thoughts on him, if we did acquire him, he wouldn't be like your plug-and-play safety like the other two guys. He would be a rotational player. But he's always been fairly decent in coverage. And he is no slouch against the run game as well. Tony Jefferson. He's only $1 million, so $1.5 million, so a very cheap option in terms of getting depth and locker room value. Also, 4 interceptions this year, fairly solid as a ball hawk. I think in limited snaps, he has shown tone-setting physicality as a veteran. Last year, he also had a pretty good campaign as well in terms of coverage grade and defense against the run. in terms of like deep coverage, I think that's a little bit limited at this stage of his career. He shouldn't be asked to play single high snaps often, but I think he can still prevail on, the majority of those plays. And I think his real value would be if the 49ers drafted a safety this year, because the class is so deep, whether it's McNeil Warren or a later safety like think Genesis Smith or Bishop Fitzgerald, someone like that, where he could be a situational safety in the secondary room. So ultimately, I tried to go over as many players as I possibly could. I tried to provide insights onto them. Thank you guys very much for watching. The combine's coming up, so I'll probably do a mock draft or a reaction video to that. And I definitely am going to post more this week because I took a little break. But let me know any free agents that I missed. Of course, I didn't talk about Tyreek Hill or Bradley Chubb, but I will in the future. Again, this slideshow is pre-made, so I kind of just went off that. And with that being said, again, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to check out this video, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you very much.